When we think of the Pacific War, we often picture massive battleships clashing on the high seas, or island-hopping campaigns fought by determined Marines. But hovering above all of this, locked in a desperate struggle for the skies, were the fighter pilots, and it was their courage, innovation, and ultimate dominance that truly turned the tide and secured victory for the Allies. This is the story of how fighter pilots won the Pacific War. It all began on December 7, 1941, at Pearl Harbor. The sudden, devastating attack by the Japanese Imperial Navy showcased the terrifying effectiveness of naval aviation. The Mitsubishi 6M0, with its incredible range, speed, and maneuverability, seemed invincible. It swept aside the outdated American P-40 Warhawks and F-4F Wildcats, establishing an iron grip on the skies. Over the Pacific, for the first few months of the war, Allied pilots were on the back foot, facing a superior machine and highly experienced, battle-hardened opponents. The pilots of the Japanese Navy were the elite of the elite, having honed their skills in the war in China. They were masters of the dogfight, and for a while it seemed like no one could touch them. The early American pilots, guys like the legendary Pappy Boyington and Joe Foss, learned the hard way. They were forced to develop new tactics to survive. They couldn't outturn a Zero, so they stopped trying. Instead, they relied on teamwork and drop hour. This led to the development of the famous Thatch Weave, a tactic created by Lieutenant Commander John Thatch. Two or more friendly fighters would fly in formation, and if one was attacked, they would turn towards each other. This would force the enemy pilot to either break off the attack or fly straight into the guns of the other American fighter. It was a brilliant piece of tactical innovation that allowed outnumbered and outmatched American pilots to fight back and survive. It was a game changer. They also used boom and zoom tactics, using the superior diving speed and ruggedness of their aircraft to make high-speed passes, firing a burst and then using their momentum to climb away to safety, refusing to get drawn into a turning fight they couldn't win. But tactics alone weren't enough. America's industrial might was just beginning to roar to life. While Japan struggled to replace its lost aircraft and, more importantly, its experienced pilots, the United States was gearing up to produce an unbelievable number of new, advanced fighters. Enter the legends, the Vought F-4U Corsair and the Grumman F-6F Hellcat. The Corsair, with its distinctive inverted gull wings, was a beast. It was incredibly fast, heavily armed with 650 caliber machine guns, and tough as nails. Japanese pilots called it Whistling Death because of the sound its wings made in a dive. It could outclimb, outrun, and outdive the Zero. It was a true Zero killer. Then there was the F-6F Hellcat, designed specifically to beat the Zero. Grumman built it to be tough, easy to fly, and easy to maintain. It wasn't as nimble as a Zero, but it didn't need to be. It was faster, had a better climb rate, was more heavily armed, and could take an incredible amount of punishment and still bring its pilot home. The Hellcat became the workhorse of the U.S. Navy, and its pilots racked up an astonishing kill ratio against Japanese aircraft, some sources citing as high as 19-1. For every Hellcat lost in combat, 19 enemy planes were shot down. These new planes completely shifted the balance of power in the air. This technological superiority was matched by a superior training program. While Japan's pool of veteran pilots was slowly being depleted, with no effective way to replace them, the United States was running a massive pilot training pipeline. Tens of thousands of young men from all over the country were trained to fly these powerful new machines. They were well fed, well rested, and well trained. When they arrived in the Pacific, they might have lacked the initial combat experience of their Japanese counterparts, but they were flying superior aircraft and were part of a system designed for long-term success. Japanese Bushido warrior code often meant that experienced pilots were expected to fight until they died, taking their valuable knowledge with them. In contrast, the U.S. military rotated its experienced aces back home to become instructors, passing on their hard-won combat lessons to the next generation of pilots. This created a sustainable cycle of excellence. The turning point really came during the great carrier battles of 1942 and beyond. At the Battle of Midway, American dive bombers, escorted by fighters, famously sank for Japanese aircraft carriers, a blow from which the Imperial Japanese Navy would never truly recover. But it was in the skies above the fleet that the fighter pilots did their crucial work. They flew combat air patrols, or CAPs, constantly circling their carriers, ready to intercept incoming waves of Japanese bombers and torpedo planes. Every bomber shot down was a potential disaster averted, a carrier saved. This culminated in the Great Mariana Sturkey Shoot during the Battle of the Philippine Sea in 1944. By this point, the combination of superior American aircraft like the Hellcat, well-trained pilots, and the advantage of radar-directed interception was overwhelming. In one of the most lopsided air battles in history, American naval aviators decimated the attacking Japanese air groups. Hundreds of Japanese planes were shot down for the loss of only a handful of American fighters. The Japanese naval air arm was effectively wiped out in a single day. The skill gap had become a chasm, but it wasn't just the Navy. In the skies over China, Burma, and India, the U.S. Army Air Forces were also fighting a desperate war. The famous Flying Tigers, American volunteers flying for the Chinese Air Force, had already proven that the P-40 could be effective against the Zero using the right tactics. They were eventually incorporated into the Army Air Forces, which brought in even more advanced aircraft like the P-38 Lightning and later the P-51 Mustang. The P-38, with its twin booms and concentrated nose-mounted firepower, was a fearsome opponent. It had a long range, which was perfect for the vast distances of the Pacific Theater, and it was used for everything from fighter sweeps to escorting bombers and photo reconnaissance. Then came the P-51 Mustang. Though it arrived later in the Pacific than in Europe, its impact was profound. With its incredible speed, range, and high-altitude performance, it was the ultimate escort fighter. Mustangs based on islands like Iwo Jima could escort the B-29 superfortresses all the way to the Japanese mainland and back. They swept the skies clear of Japanese interceptors, allowing the bombers to carry out their devastating raids on Japan's industrial heartland with far fewer losses. This strategic bombing campaign, made possible by the fighter escorts, crippled Japan's ability to wage war, from the desperate defense of the early days to the overwhelming dominance of the final year. The story of the air war in the Pacific is one of incredible transformation. It was won by the pilots who adapted, who learned from their mistakes, and who flew into battle against incredible odds. It was won by the engineers and factory workers back home who designed and built the machines that would rule the skies. And it was won by the strategists who understood that controlling the air was the key to controlling the sea and the land. The fighter pilots were the tip of the spear. They protected the fleet, escorted the bombers, and cleared the path for the ground troops. Their control of the air made every other operation possible. Without their sacrifice and skill, the war in the Pacific would have been a much longer and much bloodier affair. They were, without a doubt, the architects of victory. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this look into the air war of the Pacific, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more history content.